The Magical Journeys of Engelberg Duck, Episode 2, The Pyramids of Mexico, by Russell Keith. Over time, stories about the magical Engelberg Duck spread throughout the world. Wherever children looked for something to do, they knew Engelberg Duck kept his phone handy to answer their calls. For every child knew, no matter where they live in the world, if they wished enough, Engelberg Duck would visit them and take them on a magical journey. In a country called Mexico, located south of the United States, a group of friends were playing. Antonio, Celeste, and Marguerite had all been friends since they started their very small children. They lived on the same block in Mexico City and were in the same class at school. They walked together every morning. They walked home from school every afternoon. They did their homework together every day. After they finished their homework, they played together. Many nights they ate dinner at each other's houses and slept over. They were just like brothers and sisters. One day in school, their teachers showed them pictures of the famous pyramids in Mexico. Antonio raised his hand to answer a question. "I thought there were only pyramids in Egypt." "Oh no," replied his teacher. "There are many famous pyramids all over the world, not just in Egypt. Here in our own country of Mexico, we have many famous pyramids." "Who built them?" asked Celeste. "They were built many thousands of years ago by some of the first people who lived in Mexico," answered the teacher. "Like the Mayans?" asked Marguerite. The teacher smiled. "Very good. You know your history." "I just got an idea. Why don't the three of you work together on a report for the class about the pyramids of Mexico?" "That's great!" shouted Antonio, Celeste and Marguerite all at the same time. "We'll start working on it tonight." After school and Antonio, Celeste and Marguerite went to the library to get some books about the pyramids of Mexico. They loved reading and learning about the new things together. They also enjoyed sharing what they learned with their friends at school. When they finished at the library, they went to Celeste's house to read the book and begin their report. They went into the living room to work. Celeste's mom brought them milk and cookies so they wouldn't be hungry. Reading about the pyramids amazed the children. Even though they had studied about the history of their country, Mexico, they never knew that so many pyramids had been built. The children talked excitedly about all the interesting things they were learning. "Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could really go see the pyramids?" asked Margaret. "That would be so cool," said Antonio, "but they are so far away. It would take too long to get there." At just that moment, Antonio, Celeste, and Margaret had the same idea. They all looked at each other and just smiled a big smile. "I know what the two of you are thinking," said Antonio. "Let's call Engelberg Duck," shouted Margaret. "Somewhere in my room I think I have an old play telephone. I'll go upstairs and get it," said Celeste as she ran out of the room. "I'm so excited we're going to the pyramids," Margaret said to Antonio. "Don't get all your hopes up yet," he replied. "Even if we call Engelberg Duck, he might be busy on adventure somewhere else. Let's just wait until Celeste comes back with the phone," said Antonio. It was a few minutes later before Celeste returned with a red plastic telephone. "Here it is. I had forgotten that I had this. I haven't played with it for a long time. Everybody ready to call?" Both Antonio and Margaret nodded their heads yes. Celeste picked up the phone. "Hello. Hello, Engelberg Duck. My name is Celeste. My friends and I would like you to come visit us and take on a magical adventure." Just as Celeste finished speaking into the phone, the children heard a noise. "That sounded like thunder, but it's sunny outside," Antonio pointed out. "No, it's not thunder. It's him! It's him! Engelberg Duck, look over there!" shouted Celeste as she pointed at the corner of the room. Clearing through a cloud of smoke, as always, was none other than the famous and magical Sir Engelberg Duck. With a big smile, Engelberg Duck greeted them. "Good afternoon, children." "Good afternoon, Engelberg Duck," they all said. "I'm Antonio, and these are my best friends Celeste and Marguerite. We are all so happy that you were able to come and visit us." Engelberg Duck walked towards the children. "I always try to come quickly as possible whenever I get a call from children anywhere in the world. Now, Antonio, Celeste, and Margaret, what type of magical adventure were you thinking about?" he asked. "We're studying the pyramids of Mexico in school. Our teacher asked us to write a report about them to share with our class, and we thought it would be so much better if we would be able to see them ourselves," explained Celeste. Engelberg Duck nodded his head. "Why, that's an excellent idea. Oh, yes, indeed it is. Your children are very smart. I'm so very glad that you called me. It's been some time since I visited the pyramids myself. This will be a lot of fun. The children were filled with excitement. Okay then, children, if you're ready to go, let's all hold hands and off we'll go to see the pyramids. And with that, Engelberg Duck looked into his book and dialed the number on his magical telephone. Before they knew it, Antonio, Celeste and Margaret found themselves floating in the air, surrounded by a mist. They were still holding hands with Engelberg Duck as their feet touched the ground. Here we are, just as you wanted, Engelberg Duck said. As the children rubbed their eyes to clear away the mist, they were amazed and excited to see that right before their eyes stood a giant pyramid. Where exactly are we? Asked Margaret. Well, you want to see a real pyramid, so I brought you here to one of the most famous in all the world. This is the famous pyramid known as El Castillo, which means the castle. It was built by the Mayans about 3,000 years ago, said Engelberg Duck. We read all about the Mayans in school, said Antonio. They were great builders, very smart and had many scientific discoveries. Yes, they were. In fact, the pyramids is really part of an entire city they built, explained Engelberg Duck. It is? Asked Celeste. What else is here? Well, children, why don't we just go find out ourselves? Let's walk around and take a tour, said Engelberg Duck, walking up the stairs of the pyramid. That's a great idea, the children said all at once as they followed Engelberg Duck up the stairs of the pyramid. Climbing to the top of the Great Pyramids was no easy thing to do. Engelberg Duck told them that the pyramids was about 180 feet tall. To get to the top they had to climb almost 100 steps. When they finally reached the top of the pyramid, the sights all around them amazed the children. It's so beautiful, Margaret said. There's so much to see. What are all those buildings? Celeste wanted to know. Engelberg Duck took the children about the great city that once existed in this place. The city was called Chichen Itza, and it was here that the ancient people called the Mayans built the large and beautiful building. The Mayans built temples and monuments to their gods. They built an observatory so that they could study the stars. Engelberg Duck told them how by studying the stars the Mayans believed that they could predict the future. The Mayans also studied how the sun traveled across the sky and created a calendar that we still use today. He also described how the Mayans used pictures and symbols to write since they didn't have an alphabet like we use. Engelberg Duck talked for quite a long time and the children listened very carefully to everything he said. After a little while longer, Antonio began to look around this ancient city and saw something that looked like a soccer stadium. Pointing to it, he asked Engelberg Duck what it was. Ah, I see that you found one of the most famous things about this place, said Engelberg Duck. It looks like a soccer stadium, Antonio replied. Well, it sorta is, Engelberg Duck answered. It's what can really be called a ball court. The Mayans used it for sports. They had their own very special games. Let's go see it. It took just a short while for all of them to walk over to the ball court. The children were astonished by what they saw before them. The ball court was surrounded by a great big walls decorated with some scenes of the ancient game being played by the Mayans. There were stone stands for people to sit and watch the games. The court was very large. Engelberg knew the children had many questions to ask. He began to tell them about his place. At one time there were 7 ball courts in the city. The largest one was over 500 feet long and over 200 feet wide. This one that we are in is about 300 feet long. What type of ball games do the Mayans play? Celeste asked Engelberg Duck. No one really knows for sure, he answered, and then pointed to the walls. Do you see those 2 stone rings on either side of the walls? He asked. It is believed that for a team to score points, the players of each team had to pass or toss a hard rubber-like ball through the opening of the ring without using their hands. Wow, that's really hard to do, Margaret commented. Kinda like playing both basketball and soccer together, Antonio said. There were so many things to see and the children wanted to learn everything they could. They wanted to be able to tell their classmates everything about this very ancient and beautiful place. Engelberg Duck was very pleased to see that Antonio, Celeste and Margaret were having such a good time. Learning about new things is very important, he told them, and sharing what you learn with others is just as important. They spent the rest of the time visiting the different buildings such as the observatory and the Temple of Jaguars. There was so much to learn. They could stay there for a very long time and still never learn all there was about the Mayans in this fantastic place. As the sun began to going down, Engelberg Duck told the children that it was time for them to get ready to go back home. Antonio, Celeste, and Margaret wanted to stay longer and keep exploring around the city, but they knew that Engelberg Duck was right. They had to go back to Celeste's house and finish their report. Just as when they started this journey, Engelberg Duck told them to hold all hands, and when he took a magical phone from his pocket and began to dial. A fog gathered all around them, and once again the children flew in the air. In just a few moments, Antonio, Celeste, and Margaret were back where they had begun this magical journey, Celeste's living room. Now they knew it was time to say goodbye to Engelberg Duck. "We had a wonderful time," said Celeste. "We learned so much. I can't wait to tell everyone at school tomorrow." Margaret said this very excitedly. "It was very fun for me as well," said Engelberg Duck. "It was a very special magical adventure for all of us, and we learned quite a bit about the Mayans and the way they live. I hope that you have learned enough information to give a great report to your class." Antonio, Celeste, and Margaret ran all over to Engelberg Duck and gave him a big hug. They thanked him again for everything and knew that they would not forget this very special day. Engelberg Duck waved goodbye to them, and just as quickly as he arrived, he was gone, in a puff of smoke. The next morning, Antonio, Celeste, and Margaret couldn't wait to go to school. They had their report to present and were eager to tell the classmates about everything they had seen and learned. "All ready to tell the class about the pyramids of Mexico?" the teacher asked. "Yes, we are," Antonio said. Antonio, Celeste, and Margaret told the class about Chichen Itza and the pyramid and all the wonderful, interesting things there. They spoke for a long time, and their classmates listened closely. When they finished, they answered many questions. The teacher was very impressed by all they had talked about. "That was an excellent report, children. You must have worked very hard on your homework. You told us so many interesting things, it is almost as if you'd actually gone to the pyramid yourself." Antonio, Celeste, and Margaret looked at one another. They wanted to tell everyone about their magical adventure with Engelberg Duck, but knew that they couldn't. They just smiled at the teacher. "That's a silly idea, us actually going to the pyramids," they all said with a very big smile.